Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at some games that are being played in the Reykjavik Open, which is being held in Iceland. Now, I myself have played in this tournament all the way back in 2004. I played the Reykjavik Open. Now, it was a very important tournament at the time. It was a qualifier for a Blitz tournament that took place after the Reykjavik Open. Now, many of you guys who were around back then, I'm not sure how many of you guys who were watching the video were, but at any rate, 2004 Blitz tournament held in Reykjavik, Iceland was really important because it was the event that featured the 13-year-old player by the name of Magnus Carlsen, who played against the world chess champion Garry Kasparov. It's the first time that any of us had heard about Magnus, and it of course precluded everything else that would occur. At any rate, we're now in 2023, 19 years later. There's a Reykjavik Open going on. There are a bunch of chess streamers playing in it. 20 years ago, the idea of chess streaming, I mean, what even is that? Never would have been possible, but there are a lot of streamers who are competing, so we're going to take a look at some of their games. All right, let's jump right into the action. So now in the first game, we have the game that is played between Simon Williams and Rakhmangulova. Let me pull up her name just to make sure I don't get it wrong. Anastasia Rakhmangulova from Ukraine. So Simon Williams playing with the white pieces, very strong player, very aggressive player, known as a Ginger GM. He's a player who's had some victories against some of the top players in the world, including the former world championship challenger Boris Gelfand. So let's go ahead. The game starts with d4. We get d5, c4, c6, and now Simon decides to trade the pawns. Now this is what is known as the Slav defense, where black plays d4, d5, c4, c6, and Simon decides to trade the pawns. So those of you guys who are more advanced at chess are like, exchange Slav, Simon Williams is a great aggressive player. I mean, what's he doing? He's just playing to draw the game. Now, fun fact is that if you go back over chess history, a lot of times when players want to make draws, but they haven't agreed to draws or things of that nature don't exist, one of the most common ways that they make a draw is they play this opening where you get the exchange Slav, bishop f4, bishop f5, e3, e6, bishop d3, takes, bishop d6, takes, castles, and there's some variation with like a repetition, something like rook c1, knight b4, knight c6, etc, and the game ends very quickly. As you can tell from the position, though, it's very symmetrical, same set of pawns here, queen's very similar, knight's the same, it's very close to a mirror, and just not a lot happening. So at first glance you think, okay, well, that's what's going on. Why is Simon doing this? He's playing 2200. Why is he happy to play exchange Slav? Simon has an idea, however, which is here on move number 5. He plays this move f3, violating all the principles of chess. He decides that he is not a fan of Benjamin Feingold. He's going to push his f-pawn whenever he wants to, or whenever he pleases. So he plays f3. Now this is a very interesting move for a couple of reasons. First of all, white has ideas like playing e4 and building a big white center. So let's say you go a6, a6, e4, takes. White gets this nice center with the pawns on e4 and d4. Conversely, if black tries to prevent that by playing a move like bishop f5, you can actually play this move g4, attacking the bishop. You have this nice little pawn chain here, the connect 4. And after bishop g6, for example, you can even play g5, knight h5, and e4, and you're going to get your big white center anyway. So Rakhmangulova decides to play e6 instead, and now Simon plays e4. Another opening that this might look similar to is the fantasy variation of the Caro-Kann, which starts with d4, c6, e4, d5, and then after f3 takes. Again, you get a center here with pawns on e4 and d4, and it's because of playing f3 and f capturing back in the center. So after e6, we get e4 from Simon. Pawn takes pawn is played here by Rakhmangulova. Pawn takes pawn. Knight to c6, attacking the pawn on d4 with the queen and the knight. Knight to f3, and now bishop to b4, trying to win this pawn on e4. If white plays a move like a3, you gobble, and then you win the pawn on the center of the board, and you're ahead by 1 point. So Simon here plays bishop d3 to guard this pawn on e4, and now he's also setting a nasty little trap, which is that if black plays knight takes pawn, after knight takes, queen takes, white is bishop b5 check, fossilizing the queen on d4, and after bishop d7, queen takes d4, white is up a queen. And if you block the check with the queen, then white just takes with the bishop, and again white has a queen for a bishop. So here Rakhmangulova decides to play bishop a5, and the idea I think behind this move is that she's hoping to play bishop b6 and put maximum pressure on this pawn on d4. So say you play like a3, bishop b6, now you're attacking this pawn with the bishop, the knight, and the queen all at the same time. However, this is a mistake. Now Simon, true to his form, true to the spirit of this type of player he is, plays this move e5. We get knight to d5, and now he castles his king out of the center of the board. Now this is gambiting a pawn, but it's very aggressive because white wants to play knight g5 and use this open f file, which is why of course when you play f3 e4 and capture, it's not bad if you can get away with it because you keep your center, but then you also have an open file for your rook on this f1 square. So After castles, Rakhmangulova decides to play this move, knight takes c3. Now she could try to castle here, but this walks into the classic trick that we call the Greek gift, named, I believe, after the Trojan horse, because of course you get a nice little horse. I mean, it's a great gift. I mean, it's all good. Of course, the horse was stuffed with soldiers. We know how history goes, so I don't need to explain it any further, but I do believe that this Greek gift is based off of that story. So after castles, there's this move, bishop takes h7, gifting away the bishop. And after king takes bishop, knight check. If you move the king forward to say g6, white can play queen d3 check. f5, you can play en passant with pawn takes pawn, checking the king, rook guards the pawn, king moves, and then queen h7, checkmate. Spaghetti-o, game over. Additionally, if you play king to g8 after queen to h5, you could always give it the queen, but then white has a queen for a bishop and a knight. And after rook to e8, dodging the checkmate in one, white still has queen h7 check, knight guards the queen, king moves, rook takes pawn, again checkmate with the knight and the rook. So you do have to be very careful. So Rakhmangulova here decides to take the pawn on c3. Instead, she trades knights, takes the pawn, rook to b1 played by Simon, sidestepping the attack, and now she plays this move h6. Now in this position, probably what Rakhmangulova needed to do is she kind of probably needed to throw all caution to the wind and just take all the pawns in the center with bishop takes pawn, checking the king, king h1, and taking this pawn in e5. However, this is still very, very hard for black to play, because after takes bishop b5, for example, say you go knight c6, white will swap the queens and go into an endgame, because even though temporarily white is down 2 pawns here, the pawns on b7 and e6, black has no development. 4 of his pieces are on the back rank, 3 on their original starting squares. White has a double op combo. Both of these bishops are going to be very, very active, and the rook on the 7th creates the classic kebab, so it's simply winning for white. So Rakhmangulova decides to play h6, trying to stop knight g5 and hoping that after, say, let's just say bishop e3, you can castle the king out of the center of the board. Now the funny thing about this is the position is so bad that even if you get what you want with castles and h6 to stop all the knight g5 bishop h7 stuff, white can still play bishop c2 with the idea of creating the classic double A battery combo with the queen and the bishop threatening the checkmate, and white is still completely winning, as you can see from the bar. At any rate, after h6, we get bishop to a3 played by Simon, which stops black from castling the king. You cannot castle the king through check, because basically it means if the king goes through a square where a piece can capture it, that makes it an illegal move. So after bishop to a3, we get a5 played by Rakhmangulova. Now the idea behind a5 is, let's just say white plays king h1, you go bishop b4 here. If white doesn't trade the bishops, you simply castle. And if white does trade the bishops, well, you're very happy, because now you have an open a file, you're up 2 pawns, and you can castle the king out of the center of the board. So Simon here plays queen a4, very strong move, as now bishop b4, which is the obvious move, does not work, because you trade the bishops. Black cannot capture with the knight, because then you lose your king, and after pawn takes bishop, queen takes rook, you're down a rook, and you will lose the game. So Rakhmangulova goes bishop d7 to break the pin. Simon plays rook takes pawn. She plays knight takes pawn on d4, and now Simon sacks his queen with knight takes knight. Now this is a brilliant move by Simon. I don't know how much time he used on this move, because at times I'm not sure if they're 100% accurate. Oh, they are accurate. He used 13 minutes to calculate. It's 48 to 35, but this is a brilliant decision, because temporarily white is down a queen for a knight. So you're like, queen for a knight, I mean, that's 3, queen 3, 9 is greater than 3. I mean, what's going on here? And as we know in chess, queen is the most powerful piece, but it's very, very hard for black to play here for a couple of reasons. You have 4 pieces on their starting squares that have not been developed. White also has a lot of checkmate threats here. If black plays a move like pawn takes knight, there's bishop g6, which is checkmate, because the king can't go anywhere due to the rooks and the bishops, so you can't take the knight. If you try to take the bishop, rook to e7 is checkmate with the bishop and the rook, and the knight covering the other 2 squares the king can move to. Additionally, if you play just a quiet move like bishop to c6 attacking the rook, now I have knight takes pawn, which is also checkmate, because the king can't move anywhere due to the rook and the bishop and the knight as well. So black has to be very, very careful here. It's worth noting, as you can tell from the bar, white is completely winning no matter what black does, but here Rakhmangulova plays this move queen h4, which sort of allows the entire brilliancy to take place. What she could have done is play this move queen to d7, and after rook takes queen, if black takes with the bishop, you can check, forking the king and the rook, and after the king moves, knight takes rook. White has an extra pony here, and he should be winning. And if black tries to take with the king, you can go knight c5, forking the king and the bishop. King moves, let's just say c6, knight takes a4, bishop d4, king h1, bishop and a knight for the rook here. White should be winning, but the game would not end immediately. And for all of us spectators, and frankly for chess history, it's a good thing this didn't happen, because this leads to a spectacular finish instead. So Rakhmangulova plays queen h4, trying to keep her queen on the board. Now it's worth noting, if white tries to take the pawn, now the king can slide out and the king is completely safe. You don't have rook e7 because then I just sack the queen for the rook. So here Simon plays another perfect move. He plays rook 1 takes f7, creating castle mania on the 7th with the doubled rooks here. White is once again threatening mate in 1 or mate in 2 with rook e7. So say bishop e5, you go check, takes. Again, same pattern with the rook and the bishops, and it's game over. So bishop to b4 is played here by Rakhmangulova. Now queen e1 is also a move, but after bishop to f1, bishop d4, you can play the very exquisite and quiet move king to h1, because both of these rooks can go to this e7 square and create checkmate next turn, and the only way for black to stop it, I mean temporarily, is to sack the queen for the bishop and play something like rook a7. But again, after knight takes g7, this is completely winning as well. So instead, Rakhmangulova plays bishop to b4, trying to prevent this rook e7 checkmate. But now Simon Williams sacks the rook with rook to f8 check, and here she resigns because there are only two moves you can take with the bishop or the rook. If you take with the bishop, it's mate in 1. If you take with the rook, which is the correct capture, white has bishop g6 check. All these squares on the 7th rank are covered by the rook. You can't move the king over because if you move the king, the knight captures. So all the squares are covered. Rook f7 is the only move, and after bishop takes rook, this is checkmate. King has no squares at all, which is why after rook f8, Rakhmangulova resigns. Now this is a spectacular game. I would say this is easily Simon Williams' immortal. Even though he's won games against Gelfand and other great players, this is easily the best. And also I would say that it's a game that's very reminiscent of something out of the 1800s, one of those romantic games played like a Paul Morphy or Anderson or Kieseritzky, where you sack a bunch of material and you have a spectacular checkmate. And I'd even mentioned this on Twitter as well. So amazing game, probably my favorite game that I've seen so far in the year 2023. Just spectacular. So congrats to Simon on playing a fantastic game, and a game that will live on forever regardless of how many games he goes on to win, lose, whatever. This will be etched in the sands of time. Fantastic win. All right, so next game that we have up is a game that was played in the 4th round of the Reykjavik Open between Dina Belenkaya and Grigori Gajewski. Now, Dina Belenkaya, very popular streamer. She's competed in various events like chess boxing in December, rated around 2,300, give or take 10, 15, 20 points, and she's playing against Grigori Gajewski from Poland. Very strong grandmaster, somebody who's worked with multiple world championship contenders like Jan-Krzysztof Duda from Poland, but also he's worked with the 5-time world champion Vishy Anand for several matches. A player who's extremely strong, very well prepared, and just all around quality. So game starts with e4. We get c5, knight to f3, e6, knight c3, and now Gajewski plays a6. Now, of course, all you guys who are Trekkies and fans out there, you obviously know this opening is, of course, called the Wrath of Khan. This is what we call the Khan Sicilian variation, where black pushes these pawns on e6 and a6. If black ever puts a knight on c6, he's not trying to be a Khan, but instead this can turn into either the Taimanov variation or the Paulson variation. So usually the difference is when you're trying to be like Khan, you play e6 and a6. So Dina plays g3 here to fianchetto the bishop. We get b5, bishop g2, bishop b7, d4, takes. Now both sides have fianchettoed their bishops here on g2 and b7, and it remains to be seen how the development proceeds. Here Grigori plays b4. Now, in my opinion, this is sort of going a little bit overboard here. If I were playing with black, I'd probably look to play knight f6, castles, and then something like d6 followed by bishop e7. Let's just say white plays rook e1, queen c8, you have knight e7, bishop e7, moves of the sort. Now again, I'm not specifically clear on the move order, so here I guess computer has some idea like knight d5 to sack material, and white's doing well, but something along these lines would make some sense. Instead, what Gajewski does here is, in this position, he decides to play this move b4. Now here Gajewski plays b4, we get knight to a4 being played, and now we have this move knight to f6, and here Dina sacrifices a pawn in the center of the board by castling her king. Now the reason that she castles here is that it's a little bit disadvantageous, if that's a word, to have to waste time trying to guard the center of the board. Also, after queen e2, black can play something like knight c6, offering the exchange of the knights, and if you trade, your knight on the rim is very weak here because there are no squares that you can jump to. So Dina throws all caution to the wind, and she decides to castle the king out of the center. We get bishop takes e4 played by Gajewski. Now it's worth noting this is already a little bit tricky to play, because if you don't grab the pawn based on principles alone, why did you play b5 and b4 to begin with? It's also worth noting that if you try to develop normally with a move like bishop e7 here, white can now go e5, attacking the knight and the bishop at the same time. On first glance you think, well, takes, knight d5, what's the big deal? We just traded a pair of bishops, life goes on. However, if you take the bishop on g2, white can in between Play this move, pawn takes knight on f6, and now if you take the pawn, you lose the bishop. White has 2 knights and a bishop versus the bishop and the knight, so white has an extra pony and white should win. And if you take the rook on f1 here, before capturing this bishop on f1, white can capture the bishop on e7, attack the queen on d8, and after queen takes e7, king takes f1, white has a knight and a bishop for the rook, and white should be close to winning. Now again, close to winning maybe is a little bit too much, but generally bishop and a knight are worth more than a rook, because as I think I've said, 6 is worth more than 5, right? Basic maths I should say. So Grigori decides to capture the pawn on e4. We got the swap. Dina plays c4 here. Now the reason she plays c4 is that she wants to stop Gajewski from playing d5. You go queen f3 and d5, you get a big black center. Knight is very well guarded in the center. Same thing for rook e1, just d5. So she plays c4 here to try and prevent d5 or potentially exchange, and if there's an exchange here on d5 for example, now everything's a little bit looser because you have f3, you have knight f5, whereas in the other line for example, without c4, say you go rook e1 d5, you're not able to go knight f5 because the pawn covers this. But once you trade the pawns on d5, then knight f5 and f3 is very, very powerful. So here Gajewski forgets the 500-year-old rule in chess. He forgets about this thing that we call end peasant here, and he plays this move bishop e7. What he should have done is he should have actually captured the pawn, and after rook to e1, knight to f6, maybe he's worried about something like knight f5 here and some kind of attack. But again, with all these pawns in front of your king and the ability to play queen a5, forcing this knight to move, black should be doing very, very well. So instead, Gajewski forgets this basic rule, which of course is that en passant is a required move. Instead, he plays bishop to e7 here. Dina plays rook e1. We get f5 here, connecting the pawns in a different way, a chain of 3, guarding the knight on e4. f3 is played here, kicking the pony out of the central square. We get knight to f6, bishop to g5, and now Gajewski plays this move king f7. Now on first glance you would think that black can just castle the king. However, there is a tactical issue here, which is that if you castle, after knight takes pawn, pawn takes knight, bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, queen d5, your king is in check, but your rook is also under attack. So we also have a pyramid of Giza here, and white is going to end up ahead with a rook for a bishop, and white should win the game. So Gajewski decides to play king f7 here, trying to, I guess, manually castle, play rook e8, king g8. But if you already forgot the basic 500-year-old rule of en passant, it's kind of weird that he forgot that he had the ability to try and castle down the road, and he's trying to do it manually. So we get queen to e2, king to g6 is played here. Now this move is insane. I don't know what Gajewski was thinking. I mean, maybe he thought he was memeing, maybe he's into the meme culture, just move the king a lot, do something like that, maybe watch my Bond Cloud speedruns. Who knows what he's thinking, but he plays king g6, which is completely insane, because even if you bring your king out, you win material. If your king gets attacked and stuck, that's checkmate, you lose the game. It doesn't matter how much you're ahead by. It doesn't matter if 50 is better than 5. If I'm mating with 5 points of material, your king is stuck, that's game over. It doesn't matter. So g4 played here by Dina, excellent move here, and now Gajewski goes all in by playing king takes bishop. If I were playing this position with black, what I would probably play is a move like h6, and after pawn takes pawn, I would run my king back to h7, try to get it to safety as fast as possible here, because when you think about the position here, after say pawn takes pawn, as an example, pawn takes bishop, white has nothing near the king. The king is actually quite safe, and the only piece that can try to check it and attack the king is the queen. But once the king gets back to g8 without any light square bishops and the knights here, it's a lone queen. A queen on its own can't do all the work. So Gajewski decides, no, I'm just going to take the bishop, I'm going to be chivalrous, my king will be safe, it doesn't matter, charge ahead. So we got pawn takes pawn here, he goes king h6. Now already here this position is close to loss, but king h6 apparently is the final blunder. We get pawn takes pawn. Now the idea is white wants to play knight to f5. Now if you were to play g6, stopping knight f5 and creating an escape square on g7, white is still winning after queen e3 check, king g7, pawn takes pawn, because there's the huge threat of the fork with knight e6, forking the king and the queen. And if you take the pawn on d7, dodging the fork, then I just capture, and after takes, king f8, rook a to e1, you've got the kebab on the 7th, you've got the double stack, you've got great knights here, black has 4 pieces on the back rank, epic disaster, and white should win the game soon. So Gajewski decides to play queen a5 here to stop knight a5 and maybe try to swing his queen over to g5 or h5. The queen is being very valiant here, is trying to swoop in to save the day for the king. However, Dina plays c5 here, which is an excellent move as well, because now it cuts off the queen from being able to run to either the g5 or h5 squares. Gajewski plays knight c6 here. Dina goes knight f5 check, king g5, and now the killer blow, which is pawn to h4. Now you'll notice that black has a lot of pieces here, but again, the king is unprotected. It's a lone king on its own, and a lone king on its own is very vulnerable because it can only move one square in each direction. If it's a piece like the bishop, for example, bishop or the queen, you know, you can take something, you can teleport, as I show speed would say. The piece can just teleport all over the board, but in this case you don't have that option. The king is very slow. It can only move one square in any direction, so if there are no other forces near it, it's like the king going out to war on his own. It's like, you know, if you look at Lord of the Rings, Theoden, he cheers up all those riders. You know, it's like for Rohan, for the Red Dawn, whatever the saying is, but then he just rides out alone to face all the orcs and all the armies from Mordor. Of course he would just get slaughtered if he did that, duh. So the idea of bringing your king out on its own is just not very smart. At any rate, show goes on. Gajewski decides to capture the knight on f5. You get queen to d3, knight to e4, queen takes. If you move the king, this leads to a very nice checkmate with rook to e4 check. Knight takes rook, queen takes, king g3, and queen g4. King simply has no squares to go to. So knight to e4 is played by Gajewski. Queen takes knight, king f6, queen f4, king g6, only move, king h1, an excellent move. This clears the g file for the rook to move over, and now your king again, it just can't get to safety in time. We get h6 here played by Gajewski. Rook g1 check, bishop g5. If you go king h7, it's simply mate in 2 because I sack the rook on g7, and after king takes rook, queen f7, that is game over. And if you play bishop to g5 here, white does not take with the pawn, because then if you take, you get fossilized, because now your king is in check and you will lose the queen on the next turn. But instead you sack the rook on g5, and after takes, queen takes, king h7 check, king g8 check, king h7, rook to g1. Gajewski has to resign here because there's no way really to stop checkmate. If you move the king up, I have queen g6 checkmate. If you move the rook, either rook to g8, I have queen h5. And if you don't move a rook to g8, I will just capture the pawn with checkmate. So say knight e5, queen takes g7, that would be game over. So very, very unusual game here. I don't know what Gajewski was thinking, bringing his king out early, but he does it. He gets soundly punished by Dina for doing it. Brilliant game from her. This is the second game. Simon game, also really nice attacking game. Both these games feel very kind of like old school romantic era games, and big wins for both of these streamers. So now we're going to take a look at one more game, which is this game between Anna Cramling and Eric Rosen, played in the 5th round. Now, both of them are prominent streamers. They make YouTube videos, etc. Anna decides to play d4 here on move 1, not e4, by the way, because Eric, I'm sure, was all booked up, really excited to play his legendary Stafford Gambit. Of course, those of you guys who have watched our channel before, I have done some videos recently on how to beat the Stafford Gambit, so make sure to check those out. At any rate, Anna plays d4, although I think Anna's played d4 most of her career because her legendary mother, Pia Cramling, also has played d4 pretty much for her entirety of her career, chess career as well. So we get d4, knight f6, and now we get this move, bishop g5. This, of course, is a classic Trumpowski opening named after the classic 45th president of the United States who was indicated very recently. Memes and jokes aside, of course, this is called the Trumpovski. It's named after a Brazilian master who played this many, many years ago. So we get bishop g5, we get d5 here, and now we have e3, c6. Anna decides to take on f6. Now, already I think this is a slight mistake. I think that in terms of playing the Trumpovski, what you should be aiming to do is bring the bishop out to cut off this knight e4 idea. And if black does it, you can always trade or just move the bishop. But what you want to do is develop your pieces, kind of like you would do in the London. Bring the bishop out, say, bring the knight out, something like this, castles, play for c4, c3 with knight bd2. And the only real difference between this and the London system is you have a bishop on g5 instead of f4. Instead, Anna decides to trade the bishop for the knight, which of course gives black these doubled pawns, a tower of power on f7 and f6. But even though it's a worse pawn structure, there are some big advantages. First of all, black secures the double op combo or the bishop pair here, and bishops are very good from distance. And more specifically, when we look, I'm just going to set up a random position here. More specifically, when we look at this position, let me put the bishop on f5 and some position like this, you'll notice that it's a very closed position. The center of the board, the pawn structures are very stable, so the bishops are very good from distance, and both of these bishops have great targets on the c2 square and also the h2 square in the long term. So the bishops from distance have targets. The knights don't really have squares. Knight can't jump either because the pawn on f6 covers both these squares. So there are some advantages to playing like this as well. Actually, to be honest, I would say that I think already I would prefer to be black here. So we get c4, we get pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, bishop d6, normal developing moves, knight c3, castles, queen c2. and f5 is played here. Worth noting, of course, that what Anna is trying to do is she wants a castle to the queen side. It's also a very strong general concept here to try and do this because she's playing a player much higher rated than her. Eric Rosen, I mean, right now he's 2357, which frankly is just absurd, but Eric Rosen is a much stronger player than her. So when you're playing someone much stronger than you, the one way that you can sometimes outplay them or beat them are in situations where the game gets very tactical, castle on opposite sides, try to run your pawns down towards the king. That's the best chance that you have to win against a player who's significantly stronger by a few hundred points. Whereas it becomes a bit of a positional grind or positional struggle, I would say the chance of them missing something become a lot less likely, and it's much more likely they're going to beat you like 99% of the time. And by that I mean like 400 points differential. So after f5 we get knight to f3, knight to d7 played by Eric, and now Anna plays bishop d3. If she were to capture the pawn, there is a fossil here with knight to e5, which attacks both the queen and the bishop. The knight has discovered this fossil here on c4, and if you move the bishop away, there goes the queen. If you move the queen here to guard the bishop, then you lose the queen, and if you move the queen, say here, I take the bishop, all losing. You could of course sack the queen for a bishop and a knight, but once again 9 is greater than 6. So bishop d3 is played here by Anna. Eric plays g6, consolidating the pawn chain. Anna goes h4, and now Eric plays h5. Excellent move here as well, because if white could somehow get this pawn to h5 here, just to illustrate the point, let's just put the rook here, and white can get like the double stack and open up this h5. Maybe black is okay here, but it's very, very scary. So when Eric plays h5, he shuts down really any play on the king side. It's going to be very, very hard for white to open up the king side. Both these pawns grip the g4 square, as we'll see in a second, and maybe you can play e4, but it's going to be difficult. So we get castles, knight to f6, and now Anna does play e4, which is a mistake. That being said, it's very difficult to play because even if you can get knight h2 and f3 in, g4 is still not a threat, because after takes, black simply ends up ahead by 1 pawn here, and the king side is completely intact with the pawn chain, so black should be winning. So if you can't play for g4, then the only other realistic plan you have is to play for e4. Now already here I don't like this position, but what Anna should have done here rather than playing e4 is put this pony on g5. You have this sort of mini bastion. Pawn guards the knight. Now black can kick it down the road with f6, but black probably doesn't want to do that. And I think after knight g5 the show continues. Black will probably play something like rook e8, for example, although rook e8 does allow bishop c4, I suppose, or maybe even b5, king b1, bishop b7. But white is still very much in the game, and maybe at some point you can even sack for the pawn. Maybe you can even play e4 now and get a knight to the center of the board. But there are a lot of opportunities. Anna, however, here, whether it's losing patience or whether it's just playing a stronger player and feeling like she needs to do something active because there's no clear-cut plan, she tries to open up the position in a situation where it doesn't quite work. Now again, as I said, there's no clear-cut plan here for white. Like what white does with knight g5 and say king b1 and e4, it's a lot of finessing the pieces. It's like finessing, waiting to see how to react based on what black does, but there is no concrete plan. And players who are at a lower level generally struggle a lot with that. When there isn't a clear plan, they just want to open it up. They want the clear-cut idea. They need something specific that they play for. That is one of the differences, I would say, also between, say, IM level and GM level specifically. So we get e4 played by Anna. We got a bunch of trades here, and now Eric goes queen f6, simply guarding the pawn on g6. King to b1 is played. He goes rook to e8, and here bishop d3 is played. Now it's a very scary position, because if you play a move like a3, there's rook takes bishop, queen takes rook, and bishop f5, which simply wins the game on the spot. So you kind of want to do something to be safe, but knight g5 once again would have been a better move. That being said, I can't fault Anna, because it still feels very, very loose here after bishop f4. You're worried you're going to blunder something and just lose in 2 moves. So instead she goes bishop d3, bishop g4, and now she sacks the rook with knight to g5. Now it's already a very tough position to play. Probably the best move here is something like bishop e2, but after say rook a d8, king a1 to dodge the pin, bishop c7, eventually you're going to lose one of these pawns either on d4 or h4, and I do think in the long run there's very little hope, especially as a 2000 level player playing against a 2400 player like Eric, of surviving this. Eric's technique is simply too good, and you're going to lose the vast majority of the time here. So in this position, what we get this move knight g5. Eric takes the rook, plays bishop f4. Nasty move, because Anna's still hoping here that after rook d8 there's going to be something like bishop c4 with some pressure on the pawn on f7. But Mr. Nice Guy Eric is playing a professional competition. He's not going to be Mr. Nice Guy today. He plays bishop f4, trying to win the knight on g5. Now white doesn't have time to go bishop c4, because after takes, black is simply up by a rook and a pawn. Also, you can't take on g6 because the queen guards it. So we get knight to f3. King to g7 is played by Eric. Rook g1, trying to play g4, rook d8, and now Anna plays a3 here. Maybe she could have gone g4, but probably she was worried that there would be some kind of ice skater on the back rank. Now it looks to be covered here, although apparently you can play queen takes d4, takes, and rook e1 with the ice skater after queen c1 and rook to c1 checkmate. So she plays a3 instead, trying to create the classic Lufthansa, or Luft I should say, creating the air pocket for the king to go to a2. We get bishop to c7. d5 is played by Anna. At this point, it's all desperation. Really, there are two options: either just resign or just like try to do something to get some kind of phantom attack. She goes for the latter by playing d5. We get rook takes pawn, bishop e4, rook to d6, g4, and now Eric goes queen f4, attacking both the bishop and the knight at the same time. Queen to c3 is played here by Anna. We get king to g8, bishop c2, takes, knight g5, takes, rook g4, queen to e1, and now with queens being forced off the board due to the check, white will only have a rook, knight, and bishop against two rooks and a bishop. Black also has extra pawns, so it's simply hopeless at this point. So I'll show the rest of the game, but already here not much more needs to be said. Queens come off, king a2, rook d7 by Eric, just being prophylactic and safe. I think rook d2 and rook e2 both win, but he just wants to guard the pawn and not allow anything weird to happen. Bishop b3, king g7, rook g2, bishop f4, again trying to trade the bishop for the knight. Knight to h3, bishop h6, cutting off the jumps for the pony. You get rook f2, f6, h5, rook d3, rook g2, and now Eric plays this move g5. Nice move here. On first glance, you could take this knight on h3, but again, after rook takes pawn check, king h7, guarding the bishop. Bishop c2, you do have to be a little bit careful here. Now after rook e2, bishop f5, and say rook f3, black is winning, but one line which would not work is say rook h2, attacking the bishop, and then I go rook g2, fossilizing you, because now the king is in check, the rook is under attack. Of course, it's also a right triangle, and now after king to h8, rook takes h2, white is completely back in the game. So Eric just plays g5, just calm, relax, nothing weird can happen. Knight f4, rook d6, knight g6, f5, bishop c2, and now Eric simplifies by sacking the rook for the knight. So after takes, in this position, black has three extra pawns here. He also has two connected pawns that are just going to march down the board, and for a player of Eric's caliber, almost zero chance he doesn't win this. He would win this 100 out of 100 times, even against me. So we get rook to d2, Eric goes g4, rook to d6 check, king g5, and it gets one pawn back here, but unfortunately it's not enough, as this g pawn is just marching right down the board. Rook h8 is played, g2 check, king g4. Last little trick, by the way, if you go to g6, there's rook g8 winning the pawn. Same thing for g5 winning the pawn. Additionally, if you go to any of the e file squares, you lose the game. You go to e4, maybe you don't lose, because I guess after rook e8, king f3 takes, king f2, black still is probably better, or black's still winning, but there is that little trick. So Eric goes to g4 here, check, king f3, check, king e2, check, king d2, and here Anna Cramling resigns the game against Eric Rosen, because after rook d8 check, king to c2, there's no check on the c file, the pawn is in the way, and here the only way to stop black from winning instantly is to play rook g8, but after queen takes, white still has some pawns on the board which can be pushed, and Eric would win this game in a couple of moves. So after king to d2, Anna resigns this game against Eric. Eric moves back sort of into the middle of the pack. I think he has 3 points out of 5 now. He's had a very choppy tournament, very unlucky, because in round number 2 he's playing against Yilmaz Mustafa from Turkey, 2600 player. He had 2 or 3 spots in that game where it was +6, did not find the win. He ended up losing a heartbreaking game, so it's sort of been choppy ever since then, but nonetheless a good one here for Eric against Anna, and he's in the hunt. All right, you guys, so I hope you've enjoyed this recap of 3 games that have been played in the Reykjavik Open in Iceland, and we'll be back very soon with more great YouTube only content. Make sure to hit that subscribe button below. I'll see you guys very soon. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye.